Hi everyone, this is Michelle with the Monadnock Center for History and Culture. Welcome to our Christmas 2020 Lunch and Learn program. Today we're talking about the history of Christmas in New England. In the 20th and 21st centuries, we have developed an idea of what Christmas was like in centuries past, but that idea is, idealized. The history of how Christmas was celebrated in New England from the 17th to the 19th centuries is in reality quite a complex history, with some elements that are recognizable to us today and others that are not so familiar. But before we can really understand New England's history, we have to go back to Europe and look at Christmas traditions there. Christmas in England was a great party. For 12 days, from December 25th through January 6th, the Feast of Epiphany, people did only the work that was absolutely necessary. They ate, they drank, they danced, they had hunts and parties. People would go a-wassailing and mumming. Mumming is where the working classes would go out in groups to the upper-class homes, expecting drinks and treats, even demanding money, with the implied threat of mischief if their demands were not met. Today, we have a version of mumming that has shifted to a different holiday, trick-or-treating on Halloween. But this was not the case in New England when Plymouth Colony was founded. At Christmas in 1621, William Bradford reported in his chronicle that non-Puritan members of the Plymouth Colony were found playing games and carousing on Christmas Day. The colony's governor tells them to stop, and if they must mark Christmas, it should be in quiet devotion at home and not, quote, gaming and reveling in the streets, unquote. These early New Englanders did not celebrate Christmas. To them, Christmas was a papist holiday and smacked of the excesses of the Catholic and Anglican churches. They argued there was no biblical evidence that Christ was born on December 25th, and Christmas was nothing more than a pagan festival dressed up as a Christian holiday. In 1659, the Massachusetts Bay Colony outlawed Christmas. Those caught celebrating were fined 5 shillings. Criers were paid to walk the streets of Boston on Christmas Eve shouting, "No Christmas." The law was on the books until 1681, when the end of this English Civil War put the monarchy back in power. Although celebrating Christmas was no longer a criminal offense, for the next 100 years, the Christmas was not really celebrated in New England. In the 18th century, Christmas Day in New England would see the shops open for business, courts and schools in session. The day was not treated as a holiday. In fact, Congress held its first session on Christmas Day, 1789. But the day was recognized as part of the Christian calendar. Diaries from the time have references like that of schoolgirl Anna Winslow, who was living in Boston in 1771. She wrote, quote, "kept Christmas and did a good day's work." Or the diary of Dr. Kendall Osgood of Peterborough, who wrote in 1788, "kept Christmas at the Wilsons." It seems Christmas was recognized as something like a milestone during the year, but not necessarily celebrated as a special day. In New England, the big holiday was Thanksgiving, which was proclaimed annually by the governors and was an official holiday when business and government was suspended. Elsewhere in the United States, Christmas was celebrated during this time, particularly in places where German, Bohemian, and Dutch immigrants had settled. In New Amsterdam, now New York, the Dutch residents were placing shoes outside their doors to be filled with small gifts from the Sinterklaas, St. Nicholas, and enjoying a season of parties, dancing, games, and drinking. On the mid-Atlantic coast and parts of Pennsylvania, parties, feasting, caroling, hunts, and decorating with evergreens were all part of the Christmas season. In German Pennsylvania, there may have even been Christmas trees. In New England, as more immigrant groups settled here, and as New Englanders were exposed to these traditions from other parts of the country through books, newspapers, and magazines, the way we celebrate December 25th began to shift, and the holiday itself began to shift from a time of feasting and public revelry to an occasion celebrated at home and focused on families and children. This print by Winslow Homer from the mid-19th century really captures this shift. You see the family group through the window, but there are also some drunken revelers on the street and a boy working. Notice his snow shovel and the man paying him. In the 19th century, mass communications really explode. As technology in papermaking and printmaking develops and becomes faster and cheaper, and transportation becomes faster and easier with the introduction of the railroad, ideas move around the nation at a pace that had never been seen before. At the beginning of the century, there were only a handful of magazines published in the U.S. By the end of the century, there were thousands. And this is the way that new ideas about Christmas take hold in New England. In the early 1820s, the Reverend Clement Moore from New York wrote a poem to entertain his children at Christmas time. A few years later, it was published, and it was a sensation. He called it A Visit from St. Nicholas, but we know it better today as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. His poem introduced Americans to Santa Claus and promoted the idea of Christmas as a family holiday and not a time for drunken revelry. His poem quickly became a staple of the season, printed in newspapers, magazines, and gift books. A German immigrant, Hermann Bochum, who was a professor at Harvard, published a gift book in 1836 called The Stranger's Gift, where he talked about the traditions of his home country. People often gave books as a gift on New Year's Day. These gift books might be authored by one person, like The Stranger's Gift, or they might be an anthology of stories and poems. In Bochum's book, he published this plate showing a family at a Christmas tree. The book and the plate were immediately popular, with this image reprinted in many, many publications. As a side note, the following year, his Harvard colleague and fellow immigrant Charles Follansbee erected a Christmas tree in his house in Cambridge, possibly the first Christmas tree in New England. Windsor Locks, Connecticut claims the first Christmas tree in New England was put up by a Hessian soldier in 1777, but there really is no documentary evidence to prove this claim. It is also said that in 1856, Franklin Pierce, the only president from New Hampshire, put up the first Christmas tree in the White House, but again, no documentary evidence has been found. In the 1840s, Prince Albert, who was German, brought the Christmas tree to England. This print on the left of the royal family around the tree was reproduced across the world and popularized the idea of a decorated evergreen brought into the house. New Hampshire native and editor of Godey's Lady's Book, a hugely popular and influential periodical, her name was Sarah Josepha Hale. She took that royal image and made it into an American family. She had the royal trappings of Albert's sash and Victoria's tiara removed and published it as The American Family at Christmas in 1850. Like the royal image, this picture was reproduced widely and cemented the idea of a Christmas tree as an essential part of the holiday. Shoppers for Christmas in 1844 could have brought home another book that would forever change Christmas. Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol became a publishing sensation and has never been out of print. The story embraces so many elements of Christmas, with its scenes of revelry and merriment, but also Dickens's moral emphasis on family and Christian charity. Dramatic readings of the story became popular. Dickens himself visited America in 1867 for a tour of 400 readings throughout the country. People in the Monadnock region were treated to a dramatic reading of the famous story by Tufts Professor of Elocution, Moses T. Brown, in 1868. But one thing that seems pretty strange when you think about it is that A Christmas Carol is a ghost story. Today, we think of spooky stories as Halloween fare, but the tradition of telling ghost stories at the holidays goes way back, perhaps even to ancient times. In New England, it was very typical to tell ghost stories on Thanksgiving night, and that tradition blended into Christmas as more New Englanders began celebrating the holiday. The ghost story tradition lingers on to the present. In 1863, Andy Williams had a hit with his song, "The Most Wonderful Time of the Year," a song now firmly rooted in the Christmas radio playlist. In the chorus we find, and I will spare you from singing it, "There'll be parties for hosting, marshmallows for toasting, and caroling out in the snow. There'll be scary ghost stories and tales of the glories of Christmases long, long ago." Between A Christmas Carol hitting the bookstores in 1844 and Dickens's tour in 1867, New England fully embraces Christmas as a holiday equal to Thanksgiving. In 1830, Louisiana is the first state to make Christmas an official holiday. In 1845, Connecticut is the first New England state to declare it a holiday, and the other states follow in the next 15 years, with New Hampshire as the last state to do so in 1861. Among those most vocally in support of making it a holiday are New England's mill owners. They were concerned that workers needed a break. Unlike their agricultural counterparts, December was not a time when work slacked off for the mill workers. If the rivers were running, work continued. They knew that leisure was an essential for a healthy workforce. Christmas becomes a national holiday after the Civil War, when President Ulysses S. Grant proclaims it in 1870. Now, if we look at the Peterborough transcript and the Farmer's Cabinet, which was published in Milford during this time, we find that there are very few references to Christmas before the mid-1840s. The word Christmas appears in 18 Peterborough transcript articles between 1847 and 1859. By contrast, between 1860 and 1869, Christmas appears in 98 articles. We do not see any Christmas advertising before these two ads, which appeared in the December issues of the transcript in 1859. After that time, ads for Christmas gifts are found in every December issue. By the late 1860s, all the traditions that we enjoy today are in place. Local churches were holding Christmas gatherings, like the party held at the Jaffrey Congregational Church on Christmas night in 1867. On that night, there was caroling, recitations, and 2 Christmas trees loaded with presents and distributed by a costumed St. Nicholas. This 1869 Christmas greeting from the editors of the transcript says, "Its observance as such in every year becoming more celebrated as a time for exchanging kindly sentiments, the presentation of gifts, and friendly social gatherings. New England had come a long way from outlawing Christmas." I hope you've enjoyed this overview of New England and Christmas history. Thank you to our Monadnock Center members for making programs like this possible. If you're not already a member and are watching online, there is a link in the first comment box to learn more about becoming a member or making a small donation to help the Monadnock Center during these very challenging times. We are excited because we're about to release the next installment of our Holidays in the Millhouse video series. The Christmas in the Millhouse video will be released on December 22nd. In this series, our Millhouse interpreters share what the holidays were like for the Prescott family who lived in the Phoenix Millhouse in the 1830s. Visit our website or our YouTube channel to watch. From all of us at the Monadnock Center, I want to wish you the happiest of holidays. Thank you for watching.